JSB Talks Digital.
Hello and welcome to JSB Talks Digital, the podcast for marketers, bloggers, business owners, and those of you bringing your skills into the digital age. I'm Joanne Sweeney-Burke, and this podcast is brought to you by Digital Training Institute. In this very special episode, I decided to have a look through the archives and bring you my best bits from this podcast, which launched in June 2016. I've recorded, produced and published 27 shows averaging 20 minutes, which air each and every Friday on my blog, digitaltraining.ie, on SoundCloud, iTunes and on Stitcher. I'm so happy I decided to make JSB Talks Digital a weekly feature in my working life, but also in your life. I've had some really lovely messages from people far and wide on how I'm motivating them to give digital a sharper focus in their business. This is a key aim of mine, as I see so many business owners and decision makers paralysed with fear when it comes to thinking about social media and digital marketing. Some of the most common mistakes I find are lack of knowledge resulting in no digital activity, hiring a student intern to manage social media, having very high expectations without putting in the work or the investment, a view that strategic social media is merely posting a few times a week on Facebook, obsessing about competitors but not developing your own brand voice online, and being impatient and expecting results immediately. With every podcast that I produce, I cover social media news, I interview people and brands that are investing in digital and getting results. I highlight digital events, I give you my advice, and I share my social media toolbox with you to help make your social media and your digital marketing efforts more effective while making you more efficient. So jump into my virtual time machine and let's go on a trip back to JSB Talks Digital 2016.
Interviews.
Each week on the show, I interview a person whom I believe is transforming their business or organisation by using social media or digital marketing tactics. Other interviewees I've had on the show inspire me because of their razor-sharp focus on one particular area of the social web. So I've listened back to the 40 interviews I've conducted on JSB Talks Digital this year. And here's a mashup of 11 voices that inspired me. I've chosen segments of the interviews which I feel we can all benefit from listening back to.
JSB Talks Digital.
Allan Swan is a podcaster and RTE producer and was my very first interviewee after he responded to a tweet I pushed out in advance of producing my very first show. Allan provided us with excellent interview tips for podcasters, many of which I've been using since carrying out this interview.
Interview.
Now, in the world of social media, everybody is becoming an interviewer, whether it's Blab, whether it's Periscope. Now, I trained and worked as a broadcast journalist back in my home county of Donegal on Highland Radio, and I got a superb piece of advice that sticks with me today. So my boss said to me in the early days of my journalism career, Joanne, don't write down every question, because if you're reading a script, you're actually not listening and hearing what your interviewee is saying. Would you concur with that? What tips would you give a budding interviewer?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think, from the very beginning, if you're about to do an interview with somebody, your preparation is key. And I do agree with that person that gave you the advice. I think you have to do your preparation. It's so important. It shows a great respect for the person that you're interviewing, that you've gone to the trouble of finding out as much as you can about that subject or that person or that topic they're about to talk about. And yes, you can prepare some questions in advance. And it's always good to have it's always good to have a couple of questions in reserve, just in case the interview goes one way where you thought it was going the other way. But I do agree that, the interview should be ultimately a conversation. It should be you trying to get a bit of information out of that person, or to have that, whatever that topic is about. But if you hit a brick wall, if the interviewee is difficult, if for whatever reason that you've hit a stumbling block, then you've got a couple of questions that you can refer to. So preparation is it's just so key. You can't just go into an interview situation where you're just going to talk to somebody and then just hope the conversation flows, So that advice was absolutely perfect advice to get early in your career. I think it's interesting what you brought up about people. Everyone's doing interviews now. Even on Snapchat, you will see people do interviews, be it PR interviews or marketing interviews or interviews with people. And ultimately, the people that are on Snapchat are doing the exact same thing as what a great interview is on radio or TV. It's a conversation where it doesn't sound like an interview. It sounds like that you're eavesdropping on a very personal conversation between two people.
What do you do with those yes-no answers that people give you in an interview? Is it you, the interviewer, is doing something wrong by asking closed questions?
Sometimes you can have a very difficult guest, and sometimes ultimately that's the type of person they are. And, I think if you get to the point where it's just yes, no, you have to go back to the questions that you're asking. And are your questions open-ended? The best questions are always open-ended. How, what, where, when, why? If you asked a person, did you feel upset about that last week? They'll just go, yes, no. Whereas if you're asking them, how did you feel about being upset? They'll elicit a bit more of an open answer. So it's of the two people. So, your questions, ultimately your first initial questions are very important. But if the person just is uncomfortable in the situation and don't want to be interviewed, sometimes it's best just to wrap up the interview really quickly and just move on if you can.
So give me 3 top tips for a budding interviewer that's starting out on podcasts. I would imagine a podcast type interview where you actually can't see the person and it's all about listening to the conversation. What 3 tips would you give them?
3 tips. Well, the first one, absolutely, I can't stress enough, is preparation. Is, having your prep done, your research done, showing that guest as much respect as you can. Second, you just brought up that word there, listening. Sometimes, and it's very difficult to do it sometimes, where you're in an interview situation where you're just trying to have a chat with somebody and you are asking them a question, they're giving you an answer, but you're thinking about, oh God, what's my next question going to be? Instead of sometimes listening, and listening can bring a conversation and an interview to another place altogether. And on the podcast on theouterview.com, there's interviews there with people like Jeff Lloyd, who's a well-known broadcaster in England, who talks about interviews that he's done with Adele, and he brings up a very funny story about listening and how to listen intently when you're doing interviews. To Claire Byrne, who's a recent guest on the show, listening is just so important. And thirdly, is to enjoy it, is to try and go into it. I think sometimes we can get very technical about interviews. You have to go in and enjoy this. I think sometimes if you're doing a podcast, it's meant to be there as something that you're passionate about. You're doing this podcast, and I was delighted because I follow you online, and your social media advice is just fantastic. And I was just so delighted to see you going to do podcasting now. And I hope that you enjoy, that you treat podcasting and broadcasting as the same as that you would treat your social media, that it's a very, conversational, personable thing, and to relax and not go, God, I hope I'm doing this interview in the right way. I think if you take on board your preparation, that you listen and that you enjoy it, natural, good flowing conversations will come out of that.
JSB Talks Digital.
Mary-Alice Curran is the founder of Digital Citizenship Institute and co-founder of the Digital Citizenship Summit. Mary-Alice and her 10-year-old son Curran are disrupting the education system in the United States with their work. Listen and be inspired.
Interview.
Social media and the internet are ubiquitous. What do people really need to know that you can share with them?
So for social media, to me, is like my ultimate goal, and it's been this way, is how can we use social media to solve problems? And, social media is like the most powerful learning tool. And so, like one of the big lines working with students is, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And so, what I'm doing right now, even as a mother, as an educator and a mother, learning alongside my 9-year-old, we're trying to model, what it takes to use social media to change, and I look at it like neighborhoods and communities. And so, your neighborhood could be your school, it could be your neighborhood, it could be the local, it could be at the state level, it could be national, it's global, it's digital. Ultimately, to me, if you were to ask people to define what does digital citizenship mean, I think, if you get a definition, people say, oh, it's about being socially responsible online. And I see it as more than that. I see this like social justice piece. where it's action. It's not something you talk about or you read about. It's not something that like we do stranger danger and we do scare tactics and you should avoid this. You know, we look at social media and digital citizenship as a way to encourage and to change communities at the local, global, and digital level. And when you look out of that lens, it's like, I've said this before, my analogy is always skipping stones. You know, when you skip a stone, it's got that ripple effect. And when you use social media to positively produce change in your own community, it will have that ripple effect. And to me, that is our ultimate goal.
So many parents that we know and many parents that we don't know are trying to protect their children from social media by banning it and by not allowing them access, whereas both you and I are allowing and facilitating our kids to embrace social media. So Curran is aged 9 and Bobby is aged 7. How do you kind of square that off in your own mind?
Well, you know, I think that there's just a lot of fear, and this is going to be fear if it's parents, if it's educators, if it's anybody, you know, in the industry. And so if I can't control it, it's, you know, unfortunately, the solution seems to like block it or ban it. And that's just something that, you know, of course, safety has to be paramount. It's the first thing that we begin with. But we have to go beyond the safety conversation. I mean, I even look at organizations that just do these scare tactics, you know, red alert, avoid these apps. And, you know, I recently blogged about, there was a post, and it was like, the app is not the problem, it's humanity. And so to me, it's this critical conversation that we need to engage as many people into this conversation about, you know, the choices that I make, you know, whether that's the choices I make as, you know, as an individual, as Mary Alice Curran, as a mother, as an educator. You know, I want to learn, I want to be part of humanizing the person next to me as well as across the screen. And so for, you know, for parents and to use the example of, you know, with my own son, we're learning alongside each other. And, you know, before you get the keys to the car, you know, you have to go to driver's ed, you got to put in road time. It just doesn't happen overnight. And what Curran and I feel like what you're doing with Bobby, this is our road time. And this is our opportunity to have an authentic conversation, to learn together. Like, I think parents, you know, whether it's fear or they're overwhelmed, and I don't know about those apps. You don't need to know about those apps because, you know, there's like an app a day. There's the flavor of the day. So don't ever fall in love with anything in particular because it might change, you know, it's going to change tomorrow. The critical part is that conversation. You know, and even like something as simple as asking, you know, your child or teen, hey, I don't know how to set up the privacy settings on my, like when I take pictures or my phone, and do you know how to do that? And like doing things together. Or even just look at this Pokemon Go game. There were no instructions, but kids figured it out. You know, this is to me, whatever the tool is going to be, you know, the conversational piece, both as a parent, as an educator, and an individual, organizations as well, to be part of it.
JSB Talks Digital.
Richard Corbridge, the HSE's Chief Information Officer, is bringing e-health to Ireland's 4.6 million patients. Here's how Richard is transforming healthcare in this country.
Interview.
So, the HSE is a large organisation of over 100,000 people. Its job is to run all of the public health services in Ireland. So, as Chief Information Officer, how did you introduce them to digital reform?
I guess what we try to do is slowly but surely bring about different ways that digital can impact on the way health is delivered to them, literally ranging from how clinicians communicate with each other, how patients can access the systems and services, how the service is actually structured, can all be supported by digital. We use the sort of definitions that have come in from Forbes magazine around social, mobile, analytics, cloud, and Internet of Things to start to get people to understand what digital means as well, because the definition of IT in health ranges from connected healthcare through e-health off to digital healthcare, and it's quite a broad ability that people need to understand. But it's started to impact on the way care is delivered, and that's where people have really begun to understand what digital reform can bring.
Now, you've been quoted as saying digital health is the only way the healthcare system of Ireland can be reformed, and the reform has started. But I guess you've been the disruptor, haven't you? You've been trailblazing communications and digital reform in the HSE since your arrival just back in 2014.
Thank you very much. We've been trying to. I guess the reason for saying that digital health is the only way the healthcare system can reform is very much when we talk about reforming the system. We want the system to be more efficient and safer. The only way to do that is by having integrated care, and the only way you can really achieve integrated care is having what we're terming a digital fabric. You think currently there are 10,000 people in primary care with no IT to support what they do. There are 10,000 people in primary care that are delivering care with pens and paper. You can't integrate the healthcare journey if it's pens and paper very easily.
So I recently wrote a guest blog post for you on why staff should go front of screen on social media. And I know from my own training business that staff are actually very reluctant in many cases to do this in case they make a mistake and get called out on it by management. How have you been approaching this type of fear?
We've been trying really hard to empower staff, very much saying, let's see how this works. Let's make mistakes, but let's recover from the mistakes quickly. I think what we've tried to do is empower people to, it's one of the first things we did was how do we change the way we use IT security? One of the things that first happened in the January of my first year was I went to a large presentation and a clinician put their hand up at the end and said, there's one thing that IT can do for me. He said, currently, if he was a breast cancer surgeon. He said, if I put the word breast into my computer stops working and security come to ask me what I'm Googling the word breast for. This is a breast cancer surgeon. We've had to change completely people's outlook of what they're allowed to do with technology and stop technology security being a replacement for best practice and understanding, and really change the way people consider how and what they can do. And social media has been a big part of that, allowing and enthusing people to get involved, to use social media to make connections, to build up the networks that exist.
And I know we've had this conversation previously about, my work in the whole policing sphere, but if I'm in New York, I can tweet my local officer. If I'm in the West Midlands in the UK, I can Snapchat my local Bobby. When will I be able to communicate with doctors, nurses, physicians on social media in Ireland? Are we, the public, is the HSE or the medical profession ready for such a move?
I don't think it is ready for such a move, not for a patient to get in touch and start talking about the personal issues live on social media. I think one of the things we have done with clinicians is explain to them how social media can be used to have a conversation with patients and the public, but how conversations need to be taken off social media as soon as it starts to become about the personal health of the person talking to them. I think one of the things that social media has done around clinicians is allow that networked connectivity to be created, so special interest groups to start to share help and support stories, as opposed to physically asking for advice and guidance from a clinician. I think we're seeing more and more hospitals are starting to move to having hospital-wide Twitter capability and things like that, so they can start to react to questions. But we're always really strongly saying take things offline as soon as it becomes about personal healthcare.
Good advice. What's your own vision for digital healthcare in Ireland by 2020?
2020 is a good sort of period of time. What we've always said is this is a long journey. We are looking at an electronic health record for Ireland. Our business case has been approved by the HSE and is now with the Department of Health and Government. What we'd like to have in place is what we've termed and what I've mentioned before is this digital fabric, so that care is provided in an integrated way, so that patients can see what is recorded about them and add to what is recorded about them, and patients really most importantly can see who's looking at information about them. Something that no other country has really been able to do yet is remove the privacy concerns. And we think one of the ways of doing that in Ireland is to say, okay, you will now be able to look at your health record. And when you do that, you'll be able to see which clinicians have also looked at your health record. So it empowers the citizen of Ireland so much more.
JSB Talks Digital.
Cleona Connolly is a press officer in the EU Parliament for the EPP group. She is also a Snapchat enthusiast and former broadcast journalist here in Ireland. Cleona is credited with setting up and running the very first Snapchat account for a political party in the EU.
Interview.
EU politics is complex. It's not the sexiest subject around and it can be difficult to understand. Do you think the platform like Snapchat helps you communicate your job better because of its brevity?
Absolutely. And, as a former journalist, I really detest misinformation, and that's why I really, for me, I want to provide factual information that's clear, easy to understand, and if I express a personal opinion or a group, political position, I will say that. So I think that's really important for transparency and trust for your followers. But also, I know that the EU information is not always interested, it's not always presented in the best way, and it's often jargon heavy. So for me, my whole aim is to just provide clear, useful information from the EU, but with positive EU vibes, because I'm kind of a positive person and I'm very pro-EU myself, as my followers will know. But I do want to be very clear so that people can trust the information I'm giving. And I think that's what's key. It can actually teach people how to tell stories in very concisely, because it is that little 10-second snap. And, really a long story for me, if it's like a really intensive day, like the day of the Brexit referendum in the UK, my snap story was 4.5 minutes, which was very long. So usually about 2 minutes max, so it's very short.
I was just going to ask you about Brexit. I mean, it's dominating radio airtime and newspaper columns still a couple of weeks after the event itself. What's been the fallout from Brexit across social media?
Well, interestingly, I think before the Brexit, there was a lot of, obviously the Leave campaign seemed to be very active on social media, maybe a little bit more than Remain. And for me, in terms of information in social media, I had discussions on Facebook with people who were in Northern Ireland and planning to vote to leave, and so they were telling me and reporting back to me some of the misleading information that was provided by the Leave campaign, and then I was providing factual information to counter that back. And unfortunately, no matter what independent source I quoted, they kind of just said, "Oh well, I'm voting out anyway. I don't trust EU sources." So that to me was kind of shocking and worrying. But I think in the aftermath of the Brexit vote, there has been a sea change in public opinion and trust. And I think now people are more wary and realise that it's very easy to say something to get headlines. But now they want to know the truth and they want the facts. And I think that that's where I could come in at this point by providing factual information and that they know that they can trust me as well. But in terms of social media, the day of the Brexit vote, you could just see the shock and sadness and disbelief across Twitter and Facebook and the outpouring of emotion, because I think people were very emotional about the decision as well. So it really has played out on social media.
So before we go, I want to ask you your 3 top tips for a political organisation or a campaign-based organisation who might be attempting or intending to dip their toes in Snapchat. What would you say to them?
Okay. Well, I would say my 3 top tips would probably be plot, structure, and style. And by plot, I mean plan your story. What are you going to say? What's useful? What's relevant? Why is this important? And you kind of need to grab attention. So say if I'm talking about air passenger rights, I might ask someone if they've ever had a flight delayed or cancelled, and do they know their rights as a passenger for that situation? And then structure, you need to think that every story has an introduction, a middle with the main points, and a conclusion. So you have to tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you've told them. And that can be very good to keep yourself to the story structure that you've planned. And then style-wise, I think it's important to know your style, whether you're going to use emojis or not, that you're going to be very positive, that you show a bit of character, personality, and be authentic. And develop that as you go and have fun with it as well.
JSB Talks Digital.
Ted Rubin, social media strategist, joined me the day after Donald Trump won the US presidential election. I asked Ted if social media helped Donald get the keys off the White House. Here's what he had to say.
Interview.
If Trump was focused with detailed precision on his demographic and understood who would vote for him, because he was certainly consistent with his tone of his messages over the 18-month campaign, then maybe he worked social media smartly, Because, as we know, you can find your target audience right across the social web. I'm going to pose the same question to Ted Rubin, a social media strategist, a keynote speaker, a brand evangelist, and the man who coined the phrase return on relationship. Ted, thanks for joining me on JSB Talks Digital. I know you aren't a Trump supporter, but before we get into that conversation, I want to ask you, did social media help Donald win the keys to the White House?
Of course, undoubtedly. But, I think you have to expand upon that and not just call it social media, but call it just marketing in general. I mean, I'm unfortunately not stunned, as I'm sure many of my followers, all my followers know, you're aware, I'm totally against a Trump presidency, although now it exists. But I'm unfortunately not stunned. I said for a while I believed this would happen, and that is why I did everything possible in my power to help affect the opposite result. You have to keep in mind that this is all about marketing. Okay, it's proof positive that marketing works and that social marketing works. No one, even in the Trump camp, in my opinion, will make a direct claim that he's actually qualified. They have done an incredible job selling, marketing the need for change, no matter who the change agent is and no matter what he used to support or express that need for change. So make no mistake about it. Social media has found its place driving the marketing of the most significant win and marketing campaign in American history. I guess all the experts preaching you can't change people's minds about politics using social media missed this one.
And do you think, Ted, people like you who were anti-Trump supporters, by virtue of you giving him so much social media airtime, actually aided his success?
I don't believe that. I think that there's a few things at play here. First of all, when you're social or when you use your influence and express your opinion, you're not just doing it for the end result. You're also doing it because you want people to know who you are, what you stand for, what's important to you. You want to share that. And more importantly, in my opinion, is you want to create the conversation. Like I did give space for a lot of anti-Trump people to speak on my page because as long as they were appropriate and respectful, and some of them weren't, I had to delete their comments, when they did. I don't mean because of their opinions, but because of the way they expressed them, or they showed hatred or racism or things like that. But it created a conversation. It helped me learn more about who they are, more about this whole movement, more about who the Trump people are. And no, I back to your question. No, I don't think it did, because there's plenty of people bigger than me and with bigger platforms than me that were positive, for Trump and were supporting him. What he really did incredibly well, okay? It is the most significant thing here is it points to the incredible marketing, social, community building effort of his campaign. He listened. He listened to the electorate. He found what touched their base emotions, what they were scared of, what they wanted. And then this guy, he's the ultimate silver spooner insider, won a campaign that was about casting aside and rebelling against political and financial elites. I mean, think about what a great marketing that is. Here's a guy who's all about the gold element, making money. He was born rich. His father gave him money. His father bailed him out time and time again, and then he used the system to bail himself out. He donated to politics. He was a Clinton supporter for years and years when it did him good, and now he's got himself labeled as an outsider. I mean, what a remarkable job. And you can't just do that with billboards. You do that by getting into the hearts and minds of people. And to me, that's social media that helped affect that. I mean, he spent a fraction of what the Clinton campaign spent on traditional media, and he did it by touching people's emotions and getting them to get in, have conversations, talk about it, share about it. And then, of course, he also got out there and was totally social. Remember, social isn't just about social platforms. Social is about getting in front of people, speaking to people, talking about them, being in front of them, talking the way he did, and then, taking advantage of their fears.
JSB Talks Digital.
My daughter Sophie joined me in studio for one of the shows, and we spoke about her work on digital citizenship and why, despite pursuing a career in accountancy, Sophie will remain committed to the DigCit cause.
Interview.
How do you protect young minds online? In this week's column, I'm going to have that very conversation with my daughter Sophie. Sophie and I have co-authored a suite of e-learning courses and resources for parents, teens and teachers. We developed Young Minds Online 3 years ago after working hard on our own social media boundaries as mother and daughter. So Sophie, you're now 21 years old. Tell us first of all about your early social media days.
I suppose when I was growing up, social media wasn't as prominent as it is now. It's a big part of my life. I can't imagine life without social media. I think I joined Facebook when I was 13 with the clause that I would be your friend.
That was the rule that we set down.
Yeah, I don't regret it. I hear people complaining all the time now that they're friends with their parents on Facebook and that now all their parents are trying to join Snapchat. They can't figure it out.
But, when you were 13 and, Facebook was really, really new and social media was very new and parents admittedly were scared of it. And I have to say I was too. But we had an approach where there were rules for you, but there were also rules for me. Did that work for you?
Yeah, definitely. If you set it out from the start, then everyone knows what to do, what not to do, and it's clear transparency.
So it led us to develop a little resource for parents that is still going strong 3 years later. It's the Young Minds Online social media contract for parents and teens. Tell us about it.
So it's not just a contract for the parents to tell their children what not to do. It's more of an agreement and an understanding between parents and young people on how they should act, how they shouldn't act, and sets out, if something goes wrong, then what are going to be the consequences. But it's good. It's something that, even if it's not written down, every parent and child should have that understanding. They should set it out from the beginning whenever a child is starting on social media.
Because I don't think that in this day and age that you're ever going to achieve banning social media from your children's lives. As I've already said in the show many times, social media is ubiquitous. Everybody's using it, and even if your kids aren't using it before your very eyes, they're probably using it behind your back.
Exactly, yeah. And there's a big mindset, I think, between or for parents that, there's a separation between their children's online life and their actual life, but it's not. That's not the way it is anymore. It's all connected as one. Like, we don't see it as, this is Facebook, this is a social networking site. We see it as, this is my life and I'm sharing it with everyone.
So given that we have been working on our own use of good digital citizenship from a family perspective, how important is it to you that you now share that knowledge and understanding to empower other parents and other kids around the world? Yeah,
it's extremely important. Once there's not many people out there that are sharing, that it's not just do it this way or don't do it this way and protect yourself online. It's about actually using it for a bigger cause. That, there's so many opportunities out there for young people and even adults that, social media it's fun and it's part of your life, and, being able to share that with people and saying that it's all good. It's exciting.
So tell us about your own friends and your social network. Do you think that digital citizenship is a concept that they understand?
Definitely not. I don't think they even have ever heard the phrase digital citizenship. Whenever we announced that we were going to be speaking in America, and I told my friends and I posted it on Facebook, and everyone was asking me, what are you going to be speaking about? And I'd say, digital citizenship, and they'd look at me with a blank face because they just didn't understand what it was, and I'd have to say, it's, about, ethical, safe use, savvy use of the internet, but also using it for opportunities and making connections with people online, and they just think it's stupid and silly, and they don't get the actual bigger picture behind it, that this is a big movement that's going forward. And
so probably in the early days of when you were using social media, your mum was embarrassing. How do you find working with me on this topic of digital citizenship? Do I still embarrass you, or?
Yeah, I was just about to say that embarrassment hasn't stopped. No, I'm joking. No, I love working with you on it. I think we bring out the best in each other and we bounce well whenever we work together, you know, we're very similar, like-minded, and we have the same views and opinions, which helps.
And how cool is it going to be for us to go to San Francisco, your first time, and speak on a stage in Twitter headquarters?
Even to go, it's to the actual summit is exciting, but to actually be asked to speak at it just makes it, you know, so much more exciting.
So you are pursuing a career in accountancy, maybe saying a farewell to Digital Training Institute or digital marketing, but will you remain involved in the work of digital citizenship?
Yeah, I definitely will. Whenever I explain it to people, I say that my work in digital citizenship is kind of like my corporate social responsibility. And yeah, I definitely want to keep it up. I want to spread the word. And even though it's completely different to accountancy, it's, you know, it's very close to me.
JSB Talks Digital.
Live video expert and social media strategist Victoria Taylor joined me on the show to talk about social and live video, as well as her plans for the very first Summit Live UK event taking place in 2017.
Interview.
So you are a live streaming practitioner, but your approach for your customers is all about the customer experience. Am I right in thinking that creating culture and altering mindset is one of your key objectives for your clients?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's about, you know, the cultures they create, I guess, within their workforce, and the relationships that they build with the clients that they work with. You know, I'm very much a believer that, you know, we work back from the human being. Everything is about the human experience, and technology is a great facilitator of what we can do to create experience. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's all about experience and relationships.
Video is one of the most pervasive content types on the social web, but we now have 3 distinct types of video: social video, live video, and augmented reality. Do you think we're embracing video as much as we could or as much as we should be?
I think the use of video is only going to increase. I think, you know, I mean, I say this quite a lot. I think we very much have to look at this from an individual perspective, rather than sort of saying, yes, everybody should be using video or everybody should be using live stream. I think, you know, you've very much got to take into consideration the person, the business, the brand, and what the why is for using it. But, you know, there's so many amazing technologies, so many different ways that we can use video. I really think we're just at the beginning of an amazing revolution right now. So I think we will see video increase in use. But I think as people's education, particularly over here in the UK and Ireland, grows, we'll start to see people using these technologies more and more.
Do you think everybody has the potential to be a great storyteller on Snapchat or Periscope or indeed on Facebook Live? How can we convince our clients to overcome the fear of the live screen?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody has a story to tell. We all have a story to tell because we've all gone on our different life paths. I think certainly I can only speak to the clients that I've worked with. You know, there's sort of a certain element of confidence coaching and helping people to, I guess, recognise their strengths and then start from the strength point. But seeing confidence grow is incredible. You know, it's quite a daunting thing. You know, for yourself and for myself, we're very used to just switching on a camera and just doing it. So it's very much making sure that, the people that I certainly work with, that they're able to understand and feel comfortable with where they're at and progress naturally.
JSB Talks Digital.
Johnny Burney, founder of Speakific, a platform for professional speakers, gave me some advice on paid versus non-paid speaking gigs. I asked him the question, should you speak at an event you don't get paid for?
Interview.
Paid speaking gigs versus non-paid speaking gigs. It's always, a big question. Should you do it if you're not getting paid?
Absolutely. You shouldn't do all of them if you're not getting paid. It really depends on who's in the audience and what the potential is for indirect selling, if you like, or indirect revenue. So people categorize professional speakers as people who always get paid for it, and public speakers are people who don't necessarily always get paid for it. Having said that, I know professional speakers who will speak for free. They will say what their fee is normally, but they will speak for free if they're given the opportunity to mention their latest book, or if they have an online course, or if they have a bigger event coming up that's a paid event. So sometimes, where that's allowed, you can make more from what you sell at the event, if you like, the upsell from stage, than you would if you were getting paid to talk. So it really depends on who's in the room and what's the potential to monetize that if you're speaking for free. Of course, if you're new to the circuit, it's going to be somewhat difficult to charge, or if you want to grow your profile through speaking. Again, if you haven't done much of it before, but you've convinced the event organizer that you're the person to speak, it can be hard to command any big fees or any fees over and above potentially just mileage expenses, if you like, or possibly accommodation. So I've done plenty of paid and I've done just as many free, but I always have that caveat that I'm talking for free. I'm definitely going to mention products that I have a little bit more than if I was getting paid.
JSB Talks Digital.
Stephen Brennan is the Chief Digital Advisor to the Irish Government and also CEO of Century Analytics. He told me that technological advancement is not solely dependent on money, but instead reliant on ideas, energy, passion and commitment.
Interview.
Now, we've just attended the 2-day Health Informatics Society of Ireland conference, and we've spoken about, that perhaps there isn't enough money to go around to introduce the technology that we need. But is the challenge just money?
I think money plays a role, but in it, as technology evolves, money becomes less important. It's not important, it just becomes less important. Why? Because technology is a lot cheaper. Technology is ubiquitous, it's everywhere. So if we just take one example, let's say we're trying to support new businesses. The question becomes, do we need large research laboratories where a small number of people with special tools and assets and education think of all the ideas? Or, so the people that are listening to this podcast and they have devices in their pockets or their bags or on their desk that are connected to the internet. So they, in principle, every single person has the capability of connecting their idea, their piece of content with anybody, anywhere in the world. So this is a remarkable new evolution. And really the only barrier for us is our imagination and our energy to actually get up and use the technology to achieve some objective. That it's almost limitless what we can do. So really, it's more about energy and enthusiasm and creativity. These are things that we're very good at in Ireland. And maybe less about raw materials and about money.
JSB Talks Digital.
Tony O'Brien is the Director General of the HSE. In an exclusive interview, he told me that eHealth agenda is all about putting the patient at the centre of technology and healthcare advancement.
Interview.
So there's 2 big projects ongoing at the moment, being spearheaded by your CIO, your first CIO in the Health Service Executive, Richard Corbett. Talk to us about the electronic health identifier number and electronic health records.
Well, less than 2 weeks ago, I was able to sign a memorandum of understanding which creates the individual health identifier. This means that all 4.6 plus million people in Ireland will have an individual health identifier for them and for us. This means that all of their health records can be connected both by them and by their authorised treating clinician. For the first time, this means we won't have to have unnecessary duplication of tests. Information will be available more quickly on their point of presentation, particularly if it's an emergency presentation, and this can only produce a better outcome. So we are leapfrogging a couple of generations effectively by bringing that about. That all needs to be part of a seamless electronic health record, which is joining together systems that we already have. A key element of this is empowering patients, service users, their families as appropriate, with the individual patient's consent, to access all the necessary information so that they can see the information the health system has about them, they they can see who's looking at it, they can have a degree of democratic control over their own health information. This is a huge leap forward, and I think it's going to make the difference between a poor health system and a really good health system, combined with some of the other measures we're taking. So I think this is one of the most important developments in Irish healthcare for a generation. The whole e-health programme, which is at the centre of my programme to build a better health service, is only 2 years young. And when we look around and see the tremendous change that it's already brought, it's shown that by releasing and giving freedom for innovation in a system of over 100,000 health professionals, all of whom are really committed to doing their best, by giving them the freedom to do what they do best.
So you spoke about the HSE being late to the healthcare innovation party, if you like, but has that given you an opportunity to look at evidence-based best practice and what's been happening across the world? We've heard from the NHS today and from other health services across the world. So what are you learning?
Well, I think we're learning from their mistakes, and it's great to have the opportunity to learn from other people's mistakes. We're also learning that it may not have been a good thing for us if we were one of the first innovators. And for a variety of reasons, we're late to the party, but this has happened to us in other domains. We were very late, for example, to have a national breast screening programme, and we were the world's first fully digital health screening programme. So we're in a position to leapfrog technologies to, as it were, not in one bound, but very quickly move from an industrial age healthcare system to a digital age healthcare system without having to go through the learning curve that so many of our colleagues have gone through. So, and that also means that we don't have recently invested legacy systems that we have to make the case to rip out. We don't have those systems. So what we are taking as our biggest lesson is that this isn't about building a single, shiny, monolithic system. This is about taking the platforms we have, incrementally adding to them in ways that are connectable, and joining up all of these systems in a way that's easy to use. That's the type of thing that the portal that I've spoken about before is enabling. So we won't be making the mistakes that others have made. We'll have the benefit of their learning, and many of them are here to freely share their lessons and their advice, which is a great resource that we have. So I believe that we're on the brink of something really special in Irish healthcare.
JSB Talks Digital.
Last but certainly not least, my now 7-year-old son Bobby joined me in studio to talk about his favourite social network, Snapchat. And I think you'll all agree that Bobby B gets 10 out of 10 for cuteness, passion and responsiveness. A podcaster in the making, methinks.
Interview.
So I'm joined in this show by my 6-year-old son, Bobby B. Bobby, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Joanne.
Well, I wanted to ask you because I've heard that you like social media. What is your favourite social network?
Snapchat.
Why do you like Snapchat so much?
Because they have these filters.
So what is your favourite filter?
Face swap.
And who do you face swap with?
My dad.
And how does face swap work?
It's like you have two people and then you swap faces.
So does your dad look young and you look old?
Yeah.
What's your mum's favourite Snapchat filter?
The pretty ones.
And what about your sister Sophie? Which one does she like?
She likes the ones where she has the flowers in her hair.
So, out of 10, on a scale of 1 to 10, what score would you give Snapchat?
A 10.
Fantastic. Thanks, Bobby B.
Okay, bye.
JSB's column is a creative outlet for me to have my say on anything and everything digital. As you know, I love having my voice and I cherish it like I cherish my children. This is true. So I decided I would reshare my favourite column from 2016, the one which impacted me most and which I think is worth listening to a second time. And it's from episode 7, and it's called Just Do Your Own Thing Online.
JSB's column.
Just do your own thing online. It's very easy to get stressed by being impressed by your social media colleagues' antics online. As social marketers, we are under pressure to be creative every day, to be visible on nearly every social network, and to reach engagement levels that double month on month. There's just so much to do. Your Facebook profile, Facebook groups, Facebook pages, Facebook Live, Snapchat, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn profile, LinkedIn company page, LinkedIn groups, Pinterest, Periscope, blogging, email marketing, podcasting, webinars, SlideShare, it just goes on and on. Dear, oh dear, it's a minefield, and yes, it does play with your mind. So how can we keep up? How do we ensure we remain consistent in our content standards, frequency and creativity? Well, I've been thinking about this a lot. It seems Joel Com has the same challenge. He said as much in an email to me and his community this week. I have a content calendar, which keeps me focused, but it also means that on every day of the month I am sharing content. Here's what it looks like. Daily social media updates, twice weekly blog posts, weekly e-zine to my community, weekly podcast, weekly Facebook Live, weekly YouTube video, monthly webinar, monthly guest blog posts. That's a lot of original content. But the one thing that I do, and which keeps me focused, is that I am just being myself online. I write, produce, publish and broadcast what works for me. Content and platforms that I am comfortable with and which play to my strengths. I love writing and talking and sharing and educating, but it's also a key part of my business. I also love watching, following, reading, subscribing, downloading, commenting, and sharing other influencers' content. I learn from them, but I also realise that they do their things their way, and I love things my way, and that's okay. So let's stop stressing out about what everybody else is doing, and let's just do our own thing online and do it well. It's not a trade secret, guys, but it's a vital nugget of common sense to either get you started online or to keep you going online. So how would I describe the JSB online personality? Well, much like I describe my offline personality. What you see is what you get. I love learning and teaching in equal measure, and so I share lots of what I know. I work hard, I promote others, and I'm in constant state of thinking, and writing helps me articulate my thoughts and it calms my mind. I'm simply me, I'm JSB. So just be yourself online. Don't be anybody else, because there's only one you, and it's up to you to show it. Each week on the show, I shared the social media tool that saved my working week. So I decided that it was time to share JSB's social media tool of the year, the one tool that has changed my work life for the better. Believe me, I anguished over this decision, and in fact, there were 3 tools that I could not separate. However, there can only be one winner. So, the social media tool of the year for 2016 is Sentinel. The tool has many valuable features, not least my ability to manage 30 social networks all on one dashboard.
Social media tool of the week.
Software as a service is a vital part of my business. I use technology to make my business more efficient, more accountable, and it helps me scale. The same is true of your social media activity. So tools are a vital component of any social or digital marketing strategy. The tool that saved my working week this week is Sentinel. Sentinel is a social media management tool and more. I manage multiple social media accounts for clients, and it's just not possible to manually do this job and do it well. Think about publishing evergreen content, value-add content, engaging in real-time marketing, being a marketing hack, all the time monitoring your client's brand and online reputation. How can you do this and do it well when you have multiple accounts to manage?
Digital.
Well, Sentinel helps me do this, and very effectively. Some other really useful features within Sentinel are the ability to create industry-specific trending content, influencer content, source media articles and news stories relevant to your sector, multiple account management across Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Pinterest, Flickr, SlideShare, Google+, YouTube, WordPress, and Tumblr, and the list goes on. You can monitor brands and keywords, reviews, import contacts, and also they have an SMS autoresponder. So, if you need a social media management tool to make you more efficient and your publishing efforts more effective, Take your free 30-day trial now at sendable.co.uk. Thanks as always for tuning in to JSB Talks Digital. This podcast is certainly one of the highlights of my working year. I want to thank the 40 interviewees that have given me their time, their digital insights and opinions, which I've been able to share with you. I want to thank my producer, Owen Murphy, who has helped me make my podcast dream come true. Owen is a podcast legend in his own right, with 8 years' experience behind the mic. This studio in Flirt FM on the NUI Galway campus is where I first cut my teeth as a budding broadcast journalist, so I get that very warm rush of nostalgia every single time I take my seat here. Another big thank you to Paula and Owen for allowing me to book my weekly hour of studio time. JSB Talks Digital will continue in 2017, and I'm going to bring you more audio from my digital adventures and more special shows focusing on specific industries. Please reach out to me if you have a podcast theme or an idea, or if you want to be on the show. I'd love if you made me part of your week. So to ensure you never miss an episode of JSB Talks Digital, make sure you subscribe on your smartphone on iTunes or Stitcher. You can also subscribe on SoundCloud. I'll make you a promise. Give me 20 minutes of your time each week, and in return, I will empower you with digital marketing and social media knowledge. Be sure to stay in touch with me on Twitter at tweetsbyjsb or snap me at JSB Snaps. I'm Joanne Sweeney-Burke. This is JSB Talks Digital. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.